Fashion. Thank you. Carry on, Jack.
Okay, thanks, Stan. Well, I'm going to begin. I don't think it's any surprise with Iran, the United States, Israel, Straits of, and all the rest of it. Um, I'm not giving away any secrets, but it's obviously a rapidly moving situation. When we were editing the paper Wednesday night, Thursday morning, the story was originally that the US blockade doesn't amount to much because look, Chinese ship has just sailed through later in the night. It had U-turned back to get instructions. And then, of course, no surprise, Iran says that there's not freedom of navigation. You can't come through. So we have a blockade on a blockade. I just looked up, always a good idea, just before you start a meeting, just to catch up on the latest news. And I've only just read the headline and the opening couple of paragraphs, and we've now got Trump going to send representatives to Islamabad, meanwhile threatening Iran with another wave of bombing and destruction. That's my news from a couple of minutes ago for me, which doesn't surprise me. Now, my own take, for what it's worth, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know what the Americans are thinking. I don't know what the Iranians are thinking. All you can do, I think, is try to come to at least what I would view as an intelligent assessment. So what I'm saying is just my interpretation of events. My interpretation is that the threat, the blockade, the counter blockade is all about talks. My interpretation of this war isn't whatever they've said, isn't about regime change. It's about pummeling Iran into compliance. So, my own take, and we've agreed, we were saying this on the PCC, and if you want to look at listen to the tapes, you can go way back. Our argument has been, when we've heard stuff about, the Shah's son, the MEK, regime change, we basically gone, well, to do that, you need an alternative regime of some sort. And we just haven't seen it. I'm told by Yasmin that the BBC Persian has done an expose using the work of, I think it's Swedish academics that have looked into the royalists basically using bots to, flood the internet with their message on the basis that this is stuff that apparently is from within Iran, that actually turns out, under scientific investigation, to be more likely to be generated in Los Angeles, certainly not Iran. Either way, we do not see an alternative regime in the wings. Now, if the United States committed to a land invasion, and that would need 500,000, 1,000,000 troops, something up there, then maybe you can believe it. Not a couple of thousand Marines, not bombing. That isn't going to produce you a new regime. The idea that you cut the snake's head off, well, we all know, at least I do, my culture, the Greek myth of the Hydra. You cut one head off, two grow. I'm not suggesting that Iran is growing two heads, but the idea that you cut the head of the supreme leader off and you get the son of the supreme leader, that represents regime change. That's just nonsense. So I would have thought myself that if you were in the Pentagon, I don't know what's going on in Trump's individual head, but if you're the Pentagon, you know that perfectly well. Now, maybe Israel is a different kettle of fish. That clearly, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, the war isn't over. The war aims haven't been fulfilled, and the war aims do appear to be not just to cut the head off, not just to pummel Iran, but to reduce it, to use the Trump phrase borrowed from Lee May in the Vietnam War, bomb it back into the Stone Age, make it a non-state, turn it into a failed state of the sort that we've seen in Iraq, that we've seen in Lebanon, Somalia, and Libya. That seems to be its aim. And again, I thought it was a real giveaway. Reading last week Netanyahu's speech where he was criticizing Erdogan for suppressing the Kurds. Clearly, if Israel is successful, and that's a very big if, in my view, in degrading Iran as a single country, the next target appears to be Turkey, as far as Israel is concerned. I would say again, I'm very skeptical about that. Nonetheless, that is clearly the direction of Israel. And I think it's important to emphasize with all of this that although we're dealing with individual personalities, and I've urged comrades to read The Art of the Deal and Wolf's books on Trump, all of that's valuable. Nonetheless, what we've got, I think, is a clear line. Both Democrats, whatever they're saying at the moment, and Republicans, previous Democrat presidents, we've got a clear line in relationship to Iran. And I personally have no hesitation of tracing that back to 1979. Iran overthrew their client. Iran dissed the global hegemon, and the hegemon, has been maybe biding its time. Either way, that war doesn't surprise me. It could have happened under Joe Biden. It just happens to have happened under Trump. So Trump, of course, has got his own personality, his own style. But I don't myself view this as Trump's war, nor do I view it as Netanyahu's war. All we need to do is look at the opposition parties and different factions in Israel maneuvering, and what you get in terms of opinion polls, in terms of Israeli Jews, what Moshe calls the Hebrew population, valid name, right, is that they are frustrated that the war isn't continuing with Iran. That's the population, and that is reflected in the different politics. So yes, Likud apparently, last time I looked, was losing ground in terms of opinion polls, but the right, the far right, was gaining ground. So don't have any illusions here that if only Trump was got rid of, if only Netanyahu fell, then peace would break out. And if it is peace, it's going to be, the peace that Rome brought to Carthage. This is going to be destruction. That's the aim of Israel. And okay, America, I think, wants to pummel Iran into submission. That's my reading of the present situation. So it looks like we'll have negotiations in Islamabad. Again, don't take what each side says on the surface as being their, that's it position. That what we've got, I think, is, in terms of Trump, is a style that begins with maximalism, and then you go for the compromise that benefits the United States. And from my reading of it, I actually think, ironically, you've got a similar thing going on with Iran, that in terms of the stability of the regime, the relationship between various factions, publicly, you've got talk of maximum aim. So we want compensation. We want American bases out of the Middle East. That's not going to happen. In the same way, I don't think that Trump can demand regime change. That's not going to happen. Okay, so what are the issues? We've talked about free passage. Whether that happens, that's an open question. I think it will. I think this is something that Iran can bargain with. It's a real asset, in their hand. It's a real card that they've got. The United States has been talking about perhaps buying Iran's nuclear material. We've heard talk about a 5-year what's the word? Moratorium. We've heard talk of a 20-year moratorium. Again, I don't know, but this shows you that there's room for negotiation. And just lastly, on terms of these central issues, I do think Lebanon is worthwhile mentioning. Because if we have to put it, to bed, I think this is another illustration of it. Itwad or itwad, the Israeli tail wags the American dog. No, what we've just seen in terms of Lebanon, if I'm reading the headlines right, is America issues the orders and Israel obeys at the moment. That is the picture. That happened with the 12-day war, and I think it's happening not only, of course, with the Iran war, but also in terms of Lebanon. In order to get Iran to the negotiating table, Trump has pulled back on his attack dog. That's my reading of it. I don't view this war as something that's operating from Jerusalem, that it's all Netanyahu. No, this is America. And of course, Israel has its own particular regional interests. That is undeniable. But I think that particular thesis, if it ever deserved any space, has definitively been disproved time and again. Okay, I love reading Socialist Worker. Why? Because it provides, in a way that the socialist and a lot of other left press, for me, it provides material to argue with. It's not stupid commentary. I just think that often the comrades are wrong. And last week I was commenting on Alex Kalinikos. I hope they haven't replaced him with Rob Hoveman. I know Rob Hoveman, nice guy, but not exactly the equivalent of Alex. Last week, Alex was arguing that this is 1975. 1975. This is America. This is Trump's Vietnam. I remember it. Some of you might be old enough to remember it. They did a peace deal, and what you had is the NLF and the North Vietnamese going into the Southern Army just collapsed. And I remember, was it April 1975? I think that was the month. But I remember the TV picture. I remember where I was. And there you are. You had a NLF, National Liberation Front tank, burst through the American embassy gate, boom, and we had pictures of American diplomats scuttling from Saigon, literally in the last moment with helicopters. I just don't buy it. And I've explained why I don't think you could describe what happened in 75 in isolation, which is what Alex was doing. This was just a nationalist movement. Alex was around. Alex would have been on the demonstrations. He's older than me. He would have been at Grosvenor Square. I missed it. I was too young. But I was on the other Vietnam demonstrations. Alex would have been on all of them. Right? Alex would remember what was happening to the American army, not just because of the Vietnamese resistance, but also what was going on in America. The disintegration of the American army in Vietnam was also the result of a general shift to the left in the West, but it was also civil rights. And I've quoted it before, quoted again. Muhammad Ali, no Viet Cong ever called me nigger, right? They didn't want to fight. These people have been conscripted. It was rich boys like Trump that discovered flat feet and college education. They didn't fight. It was black guys. It was conscription by poverty. And these people were not, how should I put it, identifying with America's war in Vietnam. And what were the Vietnamese fighting with? MiG fighters, Kalashnikovs. In my own modest way, I remember as a school kid sending off to the Young Communist League my 10 bob to help finance the Ho Chi Minh Trail, bringing down supplies through Laos and Cambodia to the fighters in South Vietnam. in other words, the nationalism of Vietnam had an internationalist aspect to it. It wasn't just about one country. This was an international movement that millions and millions of people identified with. Now, if you take this particular line of Alex, it's clearly the line. So although Alex has been removed from the Central Committee of the SWP for reasons we all know why, you've still got that idea is now the accepted wisdom in leading SWP circles. So we've got an article in the current edition by Yuri Prasad. I was intrigued by it. It's on the front page, you know, in terms of the header, and it's about drones, the revolution in warfare caused by drones. It's something I've written about. I'm not saying I'm profoundly, you know, well read on it, but I'm reasonably well read on the question. Why? Because of Ukraine. If you want, you know, the change in warfare, there it is. It's not just that it was a repeat of World War One with trenches. There's been a revolution because of drones. So I was very interested to read what the comrade had to say. And his opening take is Israel and the United States have been humiliated. Well, yeah, if the real aim was regime change, yeah, it's humiliated. If your aim was, on the other hand, to batter Iran, force it into compromise, at least in a way that appeared to be a compromise that was better over the nuclear question than compared with Obama or something like that. That to me was the aim, not regime change. That's my reading of it. Okay, so if you read it as regime change, the United States, Israel have been humiliated. And according to our comrade Yuri, what we've got is a David and Goliath situation. We all know the myth. There you are, little David, the future king of Israel. There's the two armies lined up. I presume, from my memory, Goliath is a Philistine. They usually are. Either way, two armies line up and they send out their champions. And you've got Goliath, the giant, on the one side, and little David with his sling. He's a shepherd. And there you are, this big, fucking huge Goliath. And we all know the story. Boom, slingshot, gets him there, kills him, goes along, from my memory, chops his head off and holds up the head of Goliath. And David is triumphant and ends up replacing Saul, isn't it, as king of Israel, and founds this massive empire taken over by his son that stretches from the river to the river. Believe it, don't believe it. But that's the myth, and that's important. So from the river Euphrates to the river Nile is the kingdom that David was responsible for establishing, as I said, taken over by the magnificent son. I just don't buy it, though. I don't buy that what we've seen is the United States suffering a Goliath moment. My knowledge is, might be wrong, to my knowledge, 12 Americans have died in this war. 12. How many Iranians? And we're talking about targeted Iranians. There's collateral damage, of course. We've had the school, 165 kids. Yes. But what we've got is what, 2,500, 3,000? And also what we've got is massive economic dislocation. You know, I'm told that millions have been put out of work. And we're not just talking about work in a steel factory. We're talking about the, how should I put it, the unofficial economy. Millions of people face hunger as a result of this war. So I just don't see it. Has an American aircraft carrier been sunk? Well, we've seen 2 aircraft shot down. As far as I know, no Israelis have died over Iran, as far as I know. I think something like 40 people have died in, I'm trying to get it right, Iranian attacks on Israeli territory. That's my understanding. And that will include some Palestinians. 40. So is this a Goliath moment? I just don't buy it. I'm sorry. I wish it was sort of type idea, but I think we need to look facts square in the face. And it's interesting in the same edition of Socialist Worker, and I'll go into the drone question in a minute. We've got the editor writing on the Strait and the American blockade, and he's saying America might have been humiliated, but it's still very dangerous. Look, my reading is it hasn't been humiliated. It hasn't won yet. That is certainly true. The regime has survived. I don't think there was any doubt about that. But yes, it can blockade the blockade. That's what America can do. And I myself would take Trump's threat that if you don't comply, I'm going to do the rest of your bridges. I'm going to do the electricity in Iran. I'm going to make getting water, clean water, impossible. I take that seriously, and I think we ought to. And I've been told that maybe, and again, this is just guesswork. And I'm not saying this is the truth, but maybe with the left and the liberal media putting out this story about Iran winning and Iran being the David and smiting the Philistine, that it produces an arrogance in Tehran that's dangerous for its own population, that it thinks that it's invulnerable, I'll quote Deng Xiaoping and Mao. Mao said that America is a paper tiger. Deng Xiaoping, I think more realistically, said, don't pull the tiger's tail. I wouldn't be pulling the tiger's tail at the moment. Either way, just a couple of notes on Comrade Yuri. He says that these cheap drones are great weapons because look at what weapons you have to put up to beat them. I agree. They cost something like the Shahed 136s, brilliantly inventive. When I first saw them, I sort of go, this is ridiculous. A drone made in Iran. I was used to the American drones that cost millions and millions and millions. Hugely sophisticated things that they were using in Afghanistan. Here are these flying kites from Iran, and Russia's using them. I went, sneer. The sneer on my face was wiped off very quickly. These are incredibly effective weapons. Yeah, they're almost homemade. Yuri Prasad says they're not quite true. They use all sorts of components from because we're dealing with a world economy. And crucially now, of course, they're using chips. Where do the chips come from? In the main China. So this isn't just local production. Nevertheless, it's a brilliant development of this war, piece of war fighting equipment. And he's right that in order to shoot them down, you can shoot them down. They're not difficult to shoot down, but you send enough up and some get through. You don't use Patriot missiles. You wouldn't waste your money on that, but you might use surface to air, ordinary type missiles, and you'd certainly use aircraft. So maybe you send up an F-16, and the missile that you launch would cost $500,000. So to shoot down a $20,000 drone, the missile that you use from your aircraft, which costs millions, and as Yuri himself says, and it costs millions to train the pilot, the cost ratio clearly favors Iran. And the comrade says, and do you know that the United States outspends on arms Iran 10 times over? I just went, when I read that, I guffawed. I'm sorry, comrade. Look, in my latest article, if you get the print version of it, not the online version, we corrected it. I've got that the Liverpool Council in the 1980s got Danegeld from the Tories worth £60. This bought them off. It's 60 million. And no, of course, I knew that instant. I look at that figure and go, come on, that's clearly wrong. And I look it up and okay, as I say, I take on ownership of my own mistakes. Of course, he missed out. Well, he wrote it in words, but he missed out the naught. America spends more. I don't, is it the top 5 other countries? Maybe top 6, maybe 7, I don't know. But it outspends China 3 times over. So as soon as you get into that sort of, you know that that figure's wrong. No, America spends something like, depending how you calculate these things, $997 billion a year on its armed forces. Iran, depending on how you calculate it, 10 billion, maybe 20 billion. A naught was missing off his figure. Nevertheless, he's got a point to make, but he takes it too far, and he paints a picture of the poor old United States, running out of money, running out of weapons because they're so expensive. Again, I just, maybe the US fleet is now being re-equipped, I'm sure it is, with Tomahawk missiles, but the United States has got enough conventional weaponry just to carry on. It isn't limited by that. It's not limited by the budget. The comrade complains that Trump's put in for 200 billion more from Congress. He'll get it. I don't see a particular problem there. And he talks about job losses. No, this is job creation, comrade. I quoted a figure last week of the US putting in an order to up the production of Tomahawks. This is an old cruise missile by 1,250%. Now, maybe they're starting from 3, and therefore 1,250% sounds really great. Either way, what you've got now, in my guesstimate, is not only a Keynesian effect from the US upping its arms spending. What do you think's going on in Saudi Arabia or UAE or any of these rich oil countries at the moment? Are they going to turn to China for protection against Iran? I don't think so myself. No, I think what they will do is turn to the United States, and they will be made to pay for it. So they will get Patriot missiles. They will get maybe better training. Maybe they'll have to pay for satellite information. I don't know. Either way, oil dollars will be going into the United States, and Lockheed Martin, Grumman, Boeing, these companies will be booming, not only because of the Ukraine war, with the Europeans paying for American weapons, but also with America's allies in the Middle East who've got the money. They'll also be paying dollars, or they'll be paying dollars to the United States. So, but the idea that the United States would run out of money, it can't afford. That's why it's sued for peace, or so. It's just living in a fantasy land, I'm afraid to say. Okay. Yeah. Oh, also just to add the point, and I think profoundly wrongly, the comrade describes Iran as imperialist. Now, 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe I could have described Iran as sub-imperialist, had imperialist ambitions. But again, just applying, and again, I'm not treating it as the Bible, but, try applying a bit of Lenin, his book, Imperialism, 1916, to Iran. Does it export capital? Is it living off dividends from abroad? I don't see it. Yes, it gives some money historically to Hezbollah. I don't know, it supplies the government in Yemen. I'm talking about the Houthis, so-called, the government in Yemen. Hamas, it's no doubt supplied money to, but this isn't extracting surplus from these countries. This is about the Iranian regime basically getting itself an insurance policy that hasn't worked, clearly. But anyway, I don't see Iran myself as imperialist. Of course, it depends how you define imperialism, but I think there's a radical inequality between Iran, which is a victim country, and the United States, which is at the top of the imperialist pyramid. Okay, half an hour. Turn to Britain very quickly. Starmer, Mandelson, that whole scandal. Sir Ollie Robbins forced to stand down. My version of it, again, this is looking at things and saying, what do you think really happened? I don't know. We'll wait for inquiries. We'll wait to see who says what. My version is Donald Trump didn't want the previous ambassador, said, can't stand this guy. Give me someone else. Uh, Starmer, good God, Trump doesn't like our man in Washington. Sack him, bring in someone else. Who should we bring in? Who, who do billionaires like? Oh, there's Peter. Bring in Peter. He gets on really well with the filthy rich. His words, not mine. So they put him in. They announced that he's the ambassador even before he's gone through all the checks. Now, my version of it is the boss didn't want to know anything about the checks. Therefore, the subordinates didn't tell him what he didn't want to know. I don't think he deliberately misled Parliament, but on the other hand, he showed no interest in finding out. He didn't turn around after he'd sacked Mandelson. Why do we end up with this situation? He didn't ask, right? So if you want my version of it, it's something like this. There you are in the medieval court of, I don't know where the court would have met. We'll just make it up, Westminster or the city, I don't know. Anyway, wherever the court happened to be meeting, the King of England looks at this bloody uppity Thomas à Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, and shouts out, this is the story, this is the myth, who would rid me of this troublesome priest? And 3 knights went off and butchered the guy. And the king could turn around and say, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't mean it in that way. And I think that's Starmer. So I didn't know anything about it. Well, you should have. But of course, the bureaucracy, the civil servants knew that you didn't want to know. So we didn't tell you. Now, I don't know what Sir Ollie will say to Parliament, but I'm sort of guessing something like that. And then you getting into, well, did he deliberately not want to know? I think deliberately didn't want to know. Is that misleading Parliament? I don't know how these things work, but it comes down not to what the Tories are calling for, not what the SNP or the Lib Dems or Reform or the Daily Telegraph or what's his name, Glassman, Lord Glassman has been saying. I think he's calling for Starmer to step down. What a surprise, Blue Labour. No, what matters is the cabinet, first of all, and then the ranks of the Parliamentary Labour Party. Who's the alternative to Starmer? And comrades will tell me, oh, it's Angela Rayner. Come on, comrades, get real. She still hasn't been cleared of corruption charges. I mean, remember, this lot, all of them in this cabinet are corrupt. They're corrupt up to there. They're corrupt morally. They're corrupt financially. Remember the first months of this Labour government, they all had their snouts in the trough, with free dresses, free suits, free apartments, free holidays, free concerts. And it became embarrassing, right? And so but they are corrupt. They're as corrupt as Mandelson. They're as corrupt as New Labour. They're as corrupt as Tony Blair with his millions and millions in terms of his business. This is a corrupt, how should I put it, party bureaucracy. The reason you become a Labour politician in terms of the right is to go up the career ladder and make money. That's not your prime objective, but you want to make some money. And, once they're in office, here's your chance. And even if you get sacked, you've got your contacts. Anyway, that's my version of events. Do I see Labour MPs rebelling? No. And then when people tell me, as they've done in the past, Andy Burnham, and I've just turned around and said, well, he's not in Parliament. And I was told, remember that someone resigned? Remember the Gorton by-election? And I said, well, it's the NEC, it's the Prime Minister that will decide who the candidate was. And it's not going to be Andy Burnham. It's not going to be Andy. So this is just nonsense. So maybe Keir Starmer goes to Parliament next week and says, look, I really did know. I should have known. I'm going to fall on I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that, but I don't buy that. Does he go after May the 7th? Oh, big losses. No, I don't buy that one either. I could be wrong. maybe the Labour backbenchers, maybe cabinet ministers lose their nerve and go, we got to get rid of him. Look what happened last time with the Tories when they started getting rid of their leaders. Did it do them any good? No, they still went down to historic defeat. So for what it's worth, I just don't see it. Some will panic, yeah, but you do need someone who's going to stand. Maybe you need a stalking horse first, but it could happen. But I just don't buy it at the moment. And of course, what we know is what we always knew. We didn't need this information coming forward, but it's coming forward because of this vote in the Commons. We want to know, what was the problem with Mandelson? I don't know what the problem was. You can say Epstein. Either way, when he was investigated, you've got green, amber, red. Red for warning sign, amber for green. A few issues. He got double red. That's. But you would have known that beforehand. You didn't need to put him through an MI5, MI6, whatever it is, security vetting to know that the guy, is up to there. With the most dubious contacts and the most dubious history. But anyway, that's just my take on it. Okay, Stan, in the next few minutes, I'm going to cover the Young Communist League. Wow. I used to be in the Young Communist League. That's where I began in terms of my organized political life. And what happened is, to me, the most unexpected development. I'd always been used to writing in the Leninist and after that, the Weekly Worker, about the Communist Party of Britain, the Morning Stars Communist Party. It wasn't the official party. We're not the official party. We just took the name. Either way, this was the Morning Stars Party. It came from the rebellion of Tony Chater, and that's where this party came from. Either way, it's not that the CPB has gone through a massive recruitment, but it hasn't died out. And indeed, if you go to one of the big London demonstrations, as I do, and I come across the CPB, what I see now is, instead of a load of old faces, older than me, which is what I would expect, what you see is a load of young faces. And I don't do it now, but I would never expected that. Either way, what happened is that for some bizarre reason, how should I put it, neo-Stalinist cheap chic, or whatever you want to call it, neo-Stalinism or Stalinism suddenly became chic on some little tiny section of the left. It was a rejection of Trotskyism. It was a sort of two fingers up. If you're a Stalinist, it gets the adults going, what? And they would go on demonstrations, and they would march in formation, and they would all wear black, and they would have red bandanas, and they would have red flags, and sometimes they let off red flares. And what did they shout? At least when I was last on one of their contingents, not a member of, but observing, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, Stalin. And that was behind the official CPB delegation. And I can imagine, I don't need to imagine, I know what Mary Davis, one of their leading figures, would be thinking. I know what Robert Griffiths, they would be going, oh my God, we might admire Stalin, but we do so privately. We don't go around shouting his name. We might when we get drunk at Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever else you're happy to be celebrating with a lot of alcohol, but not publicly, comrades. So Robert Griffiths, the last General Secretary, clamped down on that. But also what he did, he recruited, I presume, the most talented, I don't know, or the most conformist from the ranks of the YCL into the CPB apparatus. So you've got a new General Secretary, Alex Gordon. He's an ex-RMT official. He was chair of the RMT. He's now the General Secretary. But his deputy is Johnny Hunter, the former General Secretary of the Young Communist League, while our Alex is determined to carry on in the tradition of Robert Griffiths. Robert Griffith, worthwhile adding, again, in terms of one of my early experiences was standing outside, I think it would be the courts in Luton, and there was a certain person on trial for terrorism, and his name was Robert Griffiths, and he was a member of, get it right, the Welsh Republican Socialist Party. And I don't know whether he was planning to or not planning. Of course, Robert wouldn't do any such thing. He was accused of planning to blow something up. I can't remember what it was, but I was outside there. Free Robert Griffiths, and yeah, he's not guilty, and all the rest of it. But my point is that I think because of that experience, he showed an extraordinary sensitivity to the dangers of MI5, and showed an extraordinary, how should I put it, conformity with the Labour bureaucracy. Now, maybe I'm misreading things. Either way, this is the man that said to the witch hunting General Secretary of the Labour Party, name me names and I will kick them out. People who join the Labour Party in order to support Jeremy Corbyn, give me names, I will kick them out myself. I'm not having any of this. We are a party of good boys and girls. This is the same party that told its members not to join your party because you'll be in the company of other left-wingers and you would be obliged to defend a political line on China, for example, that isn't ours, which is just nonsense. The idea that your party would impose a line on China that you can get up in meetings and say, this is what I think China is. Almost invariably, they'll be talking absolute nonsense, but nonetheless. Anyway, the point I'm making is what's happened now is that Alex Gordon has banned members of the YCL wearing what he calls uniforms. They don't wear uniforms. When we ran the workers' theatre movement way back, the comrades, from my memory, dressed in black, and they carried red flags. They wanted to present themselves, in a dramatic way. In the same way, again, from my youth, I remember the Black Panthers, and I don't think there was any instruction put out, but they all tended to wear, as far as I know, almost as a uniform, but not, because it was all their own style. They would all wear black jackets of a particular cut. They would all wear black berets. The women all had afro hairstyles. They also tended to carry assault rifles. But the point I would make that any generation, any group in politics tends to adopt some sort of style. So I remember the International Socialists, and I could spot a member of the IS because they tended to be a little bit Black Pantherist in the late 60s. And it was just a fashion. A lot of us as men, we would also wear our hair long. I couldn't really do it nowadays without looking completely ridiculous. But why? Because this was a statement against the staid 1950s, in reality, the staid 1960s. This was a statement. It was a political statement in the same way that if you were a generation after me, if you put a safety pin through your nose or ear and you were punk or whatever it happens to be. Of course, every generation and every group, has a particular style. So I'm thinking, mods and rockers, and one can just carry. That's true with politics. That if you look at Charlie Marx, he was wearing the hairstyle and the beard of the revolutionary generation, I think just before him, actually. Either way, there was a certain look, and all you need to do is look at Russian revolutionaries, have a certain style. In the Civil War, many Bolsheviks, would dress in leather greatcoats, and it wasn't a uniform, it was just a fashion statement, but goes with some sort of politics. And the idea of banning young comrades from wearing a fashion statement, I just think, again, shows a morbid oversensitivity to factionalism. And that gives you everything that you need to know about the sort of regime that both Rob Griffiths and now our friend Comrade Gordon runs. And as a result of that, what they've done is effectively kill off the YCL. Effectively, it's dead. Look at the last time it published Challenge. For example, look at any political statements that it's issued. And as a result of that, what we've had is recently a split. Red Wessex, I think there's a red Sussex, I think there's a red Britain coming. And now I don't know more about the politics of these comrades, but I do think that at least in terms of what I've read, they've rebelled on, I would call it a healthy basis. I'm sure they're still Stalinites of some sort. Again, I don't want to go too far there, but they've rebelled against what? The trans question. Good on you. Why? Because the CPB issued basically a defense of the courts and its decision on trans, and it adopted a biological determinism. There's men and women. Well, what about those that aren't men or women? And what about human sexuality? Anyway, if you want something that's complex, it's us a lot, isn't it? That we don't normally fit into the norm and never have. So we've always been, inventive and free and expressing ourselves. All we need to do is look at it, as Chris Knight would tell you, our nearest and dearest, bonobos and chimpanzees. And the idea that they're all straight is just an absurdity. No, we're not straight. We come in all different hues and all different colors, and we express ourselves in all manner of different ways. So they rebelled on the CPB on that one. And they also rebelled, again, healthy. They rebelled against this training course that Mary Davis, I've already mentioned her, puts on in the CPB, anti-Semitism awareness courses. And if I've done it, I've gone away and looked at her reading list, and we're dealing with Zionist propaganda. And you can't even call it history most of the time. This is Zionist propaganda put out, that the Israeli embassy would approve of. And I can understand the comrades rebelling because what the CPB has isn't an anti-Semitism problem, just like the Labour left didn't have. There no doubt were anti-Semites, but what it's got, what the Labour movement in Britain has gotten and has had, and what the CPB has had and still has, is a Zionist problem. That's what it's got. And so we're not just dealing with a two-state solution of the normal official communist, mainstream imperialist line, Soviet line, and all the rest of it. We are dealing with a course that says, in terms of those advocate, I don't, a single state solution, these people are anti-Semites. I don't accept that they're anti-Semites. Some, no doubt, but I don't think that characterizes the left. I don't think that characterizes these comrades either. Okay, and I'm finally, Stan, going to deal with your party. Again, I'll be brief on that. We know what's happened. They've issued a prescribed list. We're on it. AWL's on it. SWP's on it. And there'll be more to come. This is a repetition of the Labour Party in the 20s, basically purging the Communist Party, but also it goes right into the left. So you end up with people who are members of the British Soviet Friendship Society, Friends of China, all sorts of, innocuous nonsense being prescribed. But then you go in the 80s, militant. Then you go further on recently, Labour Party Marxists, Labour against witch hunt, socialist appeal, precursors to RCP, getting put, and the AWL, who are witch hunters, being witch hunted. Well, there you are. So your party's got its own prescribed list now. And so we have, the SWP issuing a statement, and it says, well, the real struggles outside your party. I agree, the real struggles outside your party. But what it means by that is the streets. What it means is a demonstration. What it means is strikes. Now, I pose this, in Russia, was the real struggle outside the RSDLP? Well, yes-ish, but doesn't mean you would then dismiss the RSD. And I'm not comparing the two, by the way. I'm not saying your party is the RSDLP, but I am saying that if you take VI Lenin, worth noting, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks become two separate organizations, two different sets of presses, two lines. And then in 1906, they re-emerge and the fight continues in one party. 1912, the Bolsheviks and the pro-party Mensheviks expelled the Bolshevik and the Menshevik liquidators. When Lenin comes back from his Swiss exile, he goes along and speaks to the Bolshevik fraction at the Congress of the Soviets. Directly afterwards, poor man, I mean, he's read out this April thesis, he must have been going hoarse, he reads out the same thesis to the Mensheviks. Now that tells you something about his engagement with the RSDLP. He never liked the word Bolshevik because that associated him, well, the Bolsheviks with the Mensheviks. Either way, he still speaks to them, right? So there's a party relationship. And so the left in Britain is too used to use split over an issue, sometimes big, sometimes absolutely trivial, and then you pretend the other lot doesn't exist, or you're forced to sometimes admit that they exist, but then you get back to business as normal. I remember the line, I think it was in RS21, we don't normally deal with the rest of the left, but we have to deal with Lindsay German on the trans question. First time. This is an organization that shares common origins, that they view themselves as part of the same tradition, and yet you don't mention Lindsay German and Counterfire, except when it comes to the trans question. There's something wrong there with the culture. Anyway, the comrades say we don't go in for deep entrism. I can understand that in your party. It's falling apart. We've had Scotland already break away. There'll be something left, but not much. What's going on in the proto branches is the majority are walking voting with their feet, just leaving, going here, going there, going anywhere. Okay, so I understand that. From our point of view, we want to stay in there and comment and try to educate the left about partyism and culture and program through this struggle. So that's why we're in it, not with the hope that things will go right. Okay, and then I just finished with this, and the editorial, this is in Socialist Worker, says, well, there was always a tension in your party between those that supported electoralism and labourism. I'd separate the two out. We believe in elections. The Bolsheviks forged themselves not only on the streets, not only on strikes, but not least through standing in elections. August Nimps had written an excellent book, Lenin as Election Organizer, right? And he describes the Bolsheviks having boycotted the first Tsarist Duma in the name of the revolution, how the Bolsheviks successfully stand and how they win the entire workers' Curia in 1912. And a look at them in 1917, Soviet elections, but also elections to local authorities. The Bolsheviks were there. The Bolsheviks were building their organization through standing in elections. That was the Marxist tradition. That was the Marxist tradition as opposed to the anarchist, the Proudhonist, the syndicalist tradition. What marked out the Bolsheviks is we take elections seriously. It didn't mean that we think that socialism is going to be introduced on a wet Wednesday afternoon through a vote in the House of Commons. No, it goes hand in hand precisely with what about the arms question, which the left, let's laugh at us about. But that's the traditional social democratic Bolshevik approach. We need a people's militia. People's militia can be born under the law or outside the law. So the Bolsheviks, the Soviets had army units. They also had the Red Guards. Right? Anyway, the point I'm making is that we reject the idea that electoralism or standing in elections is somehow right wing. No, the Bolsheviks were open. We stand, maybe they had to put their language, but basically we stand for a republic. We stand for the overthrow of Tsarism. That was the message. That's what people understood by their message. Where the comrades are right, they say that went hand in hand. And that's what's going on with your party, with just standing on bread and butter issues. Look at the your party candidates that will be standing on May the 7th. Yes, low-level politics that are below the level of the Green Party, or for that matter, George Galloway's Workers' Party. And then I'm reading this in Socialist Worker. It's on a double-page spread. There's, what we think. There's the column there. And on the other page, on the facing page, we have, there's a comrade, Micah Evans, standing as an Ealing community independent. Well, you get where she's standing, Ealing. And what's she standing on then? Is she standing on revolution? Is she standing on this revolutionary? No, she's standing on, I don't want the local community centre shut. I'm against cuts. I'm also an anti-racist, by the way. That's it. So the SWP is sort of incapable of actually, making a critique on the one side and not actually looking in the mirror and saying, doesn't that remind you of someone, i.e. ourselves? The SWP's got a whole number of different candidates standing on May the 7th, and they'll all be standing on minimalist politics. They might mention Palestine, they might mention Iran, I don't know. Nonetheless, the approach is precisely bread and butter issues. And I'm going to finish with this one, Stan, same subject, and that is our friend Claudia Webb, ex-MP, has gone into print justifying this prescribed list in your party in the Morning Star. And believe it or not, if you haven't read the article, I urge you to go. If you want to laugh, I urge you to read it. And according to our Claudia, first time I heard Claudia, by the way, I think I was sitting next to Comrade Stan there. And I think I had my hands in my, my head in my hand. Oh my God, she's poorly. I think Stan might have, given me an elbow. Do you think she's bad? God, dreadful. Either way, if you want to think, if you want to find out why I thought she was dreadful, read her article in the Morning Star. She seriously is trying to recruit Rosa Luxemburg as her Marxist orthodoxy that's in favor of this purge of the organized revolutionary left. She also recruits later on Gramsci. I think now someone I've heard says that this article, I don't know, this article was written by AI. I can believe it, but I actually think that she's, how should I put it, theoretically challenging enough to have written it herself. But honestly, the idea of Rosa Luxemburg, yes, it's true that in terms of her response to Lenin after the Second Congress, this is the split between the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks, she was definitely sympathetic to the Mensheviks. There's no doubt about it. So was Karl Kautsky. So was the general opinion amongst the stars of social democracy. Kautsky became later, a couple of years later, an honorary Bolshevik. Rosa Luxemburg became an ally of the Bolsheviks at the Unity Congresses, not least the London 1907, if I get it right, Unity Congress. This is when the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks, along with the Polish and other social democrats from the Russian Empire, had a congress. Either way, Rosa Luxemburg, has got this image, Cold War image, of being a libertarian. I beg to differ. She was a member of the social democracy, let me get it right, of the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania. Now, that didn't make her a royalist. This is for the benefit of idiots, sorry, Steve, like Steve Freeman. GB, you cannot use the word GB. Rosa Luxemburg used the Russian Empire's name for a particular territory, and this was the bit of Poland that had been carved out by the Russian Empire. Austria-Hungary took a bit, Prussia took a bit. Russia had the kingdom bit, what was called the kingdom. Either way, the social democracy of the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania was run along strictly centralist lines that made the Bolsheviks, and true, this is true, made the Bolsheviks look, like liberals. Why? Because it's a myth that Lenin founded a monolithic party. There were factions in the Bolshevik party. There was constant debate in the Bolshevik party, open debates, not least between Luxemburg and Lenin, not least between Bukharin and Lenin and all the rest of it. And we all know the history of the national question and all the rest of it. Rosa Luxemburg was also a member of the German Social Democratic Party. Again, open contestation of different viewpoints. Bernstein, Kautsky, the centre. She was part of the left, a bit, as Mike McNair explained in last week's paper, who part of which actually supported World War One. It wasn't a neat, left-right split. Either way, she took a good line when it came to World War One. But the idea that she would have approved what Corbyn and Claudia and Carrie Murphy was doing is just an absurdity. I mean, it really is. What is good about it is that she's trying to use Marxist arguments. And having mentioned Mike McNair, we've got Mike McNair. I'm not saying he'll spend much time on our Claudia because he's also going to take on Duncan Chappell on the question of your party and factions and all the rest of it. Either way, we welcome her intervention. We welcome the chance of having an argument. And I'm glad it's on the terrain of Marxism. That's a very positive thing. All I can say, though, is my own assessment is that the comrades are getting rid of the left and they're killing the organization that they think they're protecting. This isn't going to be a British Podemos. This is going to be a British nothing. Maybe here or there, maybe in, where the hell was it? Ealing, your party does brilliantly. I doubt it somehow, but local flukes can happen. But I do think that we are in the midst of the funeral games when it comes to your party. I finish with that, Stan. Thank you.